You're listening to the British Baseball Podcast. And joining me today is former Enfield Spartans catcher and novelist Gary Bedingfield. Gary, how are you?
Very well, thanks. Very well, Matt. Good to be here.
Lovely stuff. Thank you for joining me. We've got quite a lot of questions that I'm itching to ask. I think we'll start off with your baseballing days before we move on to your books and your website. So, Gary, can you tell us a bit about your background in baseball and how you got interested in the sport?
Oh, it goes back a long way, Matt. I started playing organized baseball when I was about 12 or 13, so 1976, which was a long time ago. 1976 was the summer of the drought. I doubt that there might be a few people that will remember that, but it was a crazy summer that just started in about May and never ended until about the end of September. So it was the first year to play baseball, and it was just a perfect year because the weather was just spectacular throughout the entire summer. But as far as getting into baseball is concerned, that really was a link with my dad. He's I was going to say he was a musician, but he still is a musician. And he used to have bands that played on US air bases over here in the UK during the war. Makes it sound even older. Not during the war, after the war. Okay, he'd hate me for that, right? After the war, and he just kind of gained an interest in baseball. I guess he picked up a couple of gloves and ball and bat and stuff while he was there, and we used to kind of play around as kids, just playing catch all the time. And so baseball was always there. I've got pictures of me about sort of 3-4 years old with a bat and a glove and a ball. But when I got to about 12, we just put a team together of just local kids, got all the local kids together. In fact, some of the guys on that team in 1976, I was still playing with in 1996. So, we'd stuck together as a team for 20 years. So I'm sure we'll kind of talk about the Spartans as we go along. But the Spartans really started way back then in 1976 in that summer. The Spartans, the Enfield Chiefs, that's who they were originally.
Yeah.
A long history and just a lot of the same players, which was a great thing, really.
That's really cool. So the original Enfield Spartans came from you and your mates forming a baseball club when you were kids?
Yep, just local kids getting together. And as I say, a lot of those stuck with the team. Some of them were still playing, as I was, 20 years later on the same team. But yeah, they're just kids from the local neighborhood. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So what were your highlights, your lowlights with the Spartans?
What were the highlights? Man, I guess there were so many. We were a young team when we first got into the kind of senior leagues, the British senior leagues. So we were a very young team, and we were kind of different sort of team because we were kids that had been playing together for a few years. A lot of the other teams were dependent on quite a lot of foreign players, a lot of Americans and Canadians. So I had Japanese players, other European players who kind of built their team up. And we were very much just British players really that were playing. So I remember our first year kind of in the senior league, we kind of struggled against other teams. And then I think the following year, I think we finished second in the league, but we won the first of a few kind of cups that we won. We won a knockout cup, I think, fairly early on. And then we just kind of grew from there, really. And then we ended up winning British championships. Can't remember what years. So back in the late 80s, early 90s, we won back-to-back British championships on a couple of occasions. And baseball was just a massive part of my life for so many years. All that time I was playing, I really didn't think about, which probably wasn't a wise move, but I didn't really think about a career during those years because baseball was that important to me that my whole life just centered around getting out and playing. And when we weren't playing, we were practicing.
That's really interesting.
It was a great life. It took over my life, and that's one of the things that people have said. Why did you stop playing? I said, well, I kind of needed to get a career. It's got to that point where I kind of I've loved playing baseball. I really need to do something with my life. So and the two just weren't going to work together. There was no way that I could play baseball and focus on a career. So what happened was I thought baseball now needs to take a back seat, and this was was in my mid-30s by this point anyway, so it was time to kind of put baseball on the back burner for a while and focus on some sort of a career. Although at that stage I didn't know what the hell that was going to be, but figure that out in the end. Yeah.
With your passion for baseball being that strong, how hard was it then to try and pick a career over the sport that you love?
It was difficult because the first thing I did was coach the American School of London. That was my my first job outside of playing baseball was the baseball coach there. But then what I do now is I'm involved in training and coaching, but I work with members of staff, so it's kind of personal development within staff members. So I just feel a lot of what I've learned in baseball and a lot of what I learned in coaching baseball, I'm now kind of take into the training room with staff members. So it's kind of it's not a natural progression, but it was an easy step to take, really. So it's not, it's nothing to do with baseball, but it's still got that nice link to it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. Just touching back on the Spartan stuff then, how did the team then grow and develop from friends and pals training and having fun into, well, you'll have to look at the copies of Line Drive magazine on Project Cobb to see it's just full of Spartans versus Warriors and the finals and stuff. How did that journey happen?
One of the things that we had that I don't think any other team had was two non-playing coaches. We had a guy named Henry Loescher and another one named Jack Akers. So we had two people who were non-playing coaches. Jack played in his first couple of seasons with us, but then became a field coach, and Henry never played. Henry was purely a coach. So both Americans, but didn't play, they coached. And that was a massive difference, I think, for us, because every other team sort of coached themselves and learned by themselves. Well, we had two guys on the sideline who were able to watch every move that we made and help us correct those moves that we weren't making right. And I think that was a massive difference for us as a team. I don't remember any other team having, in fact, I don't remember any team having non-playing coaches, to be honest. Every team had a manager or a coach, but they were always a player as well. And that's difficult to do on the field, to be able to support other players when you can't really see what they're doing because you're worrying about your own game. So I think that was a massive part of things. Really having these coaches who work with us. We were a hardworking team as well. We were a very hardworking team. We trained Tuesdays and Thursdays every week, but every other day in that week there was always some guys down on the field. There would be a handful of us down there practicing as well. So we worked very, very hard. So I would say just hard work, the discipline of having those off-field coaches, the fact that we love the game, the fact that we'd grown up together, knew each other so well that we kind of knew what each other was going to do, what they were doing. And I think all those things really helped. We certainly had players from overseas. We weren't a purely British team. As we progressed through the leagues and got to the kind of the highest level, we needed that support from other players. So we always had a couple of players from overseas that were with us, some really good players. But the nucleus of the team were pretty much UK based, born and bred. Even Oscar Marcelino, who doesn't sound very British, but he had a British passport, so he counts as well. Yeah.
If you've played through the 70s, 80s, and 90s, you touched on for an intro. Are there any unique challenges that you faced then that you don't really see now?
Lack of equipment. Equipment was really hard to come by. Just getting a pair of cleats was almost impossible to track down. That was really hard. Gloves, bats, they were always difficult. Baseballs are hard to get hold of. One of the biggest differences, I think, though, is that we didn't have any baseball on TV at all. We had nothing on TV. We learned how to play from books, which I can't imagine kids these days are doing. Up and coming players are gonna watch videos of things. We didn't have it. Videos didn't exist in those early days. We really didn't have access to baseball on video, even when video became a thing. So we kind of learned to play from books, from playbooks, the kind of picture books that showed you how to play, and we kind of learned that way. But But the real hardship, I think, was just equipment, just getting hold of equipment. You know, we learned to take great care of what we had, because we had no idea how we were ever going to replace it. You know, it was a glove had to last you, you know, as far as we were concerned, it had to last us a lifetime. So we, you know, our equipment, we always really looked after.
Are you still getting any of your old stuff as mementos?
I wish I had more than I do. No, not much at all. No, it's kind of disappeared over the years. But I can still picture the very early gloves that we had. I still remember them. Yeah, and I left the catcher's mitt I had for the last few years that I really loved to use. I actually left that with the American school. The young catcher there was a good up and coming little player, and he loved the glove that I had always used it. So I left that with him when I left there. But no, I don't really have much at all anymore. No, I must admit.
Oh, shame. What was your favourite era to play in then? Which were your favourite years? Because I'm guessing that baseball had changed. But I've seen it like ups and downs through the stories that I've heard from all over baseball spectrum. So which was your favourite time period?
You know what? It's hard to pick out anything in particular, because the 70s we were playing as kids. So that was great. We were playing in junior leagues, playing against kind of, you know, other up and coming junior teams that would eventually become the senior teams that we became as well. So that was great. The fact that we were just kids doing that. We used to travel on the London Underground to get to a lot of the games we used to go to. So it's like an adventure doing that sort of stuff. And when we were kids as well, we used to play against the US Air Force teams. So we would travel up to air bases like, well, it's not there anymore. RAF Chicksands is one of the bases we would go to. Alconbury, Lakenheath, Milton Hall. We play against all those as youth teams, and we just used to bundle in my dad's car. So he would have, he'd have about a dozen kids in a car. There'd be kids in the footwell, kids in the boot. We just have kids everywhere in this car to go there. So that was always fun. Those very early days. The 80s, I guess we were becoming a recognized team, and then I suppose when you get to kind of the early 90s, kind of the era with Rob Nelson, that was when we really kind of dominated everything. So they were all kind of they were fun and unique in their own way.
That's cool. What were the facilities like on these bases? Were they like, again, pardon me, like sandbags for the bases, or is it like proper purpose-built fields?
On the US air bases, proper purpose-built fields. Yeah, to be honest, when you go through the gates of any of these air bases, you're in Little America. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't know you were still on the UK. It's really strange. Everything is very American. And when you get to the field, it's a purpose-built little league baseball field. You know, it would have a backstop, quite often dugouts. It was great to, that was the only time we ever really saw a field like that until we built one in Enfield. We built a field. In fact, we built two fields down in Enfield. But until we built those, that was the only time we ever saw a genuine baseball field was when we were at the bases.
That's cool. Which players and coaches or people had the biggest impact on you as a player and a person?
I got to say Jack Akers had a big influence on me, who was our coach. He had a big influence. He was a great guy, really an ex-military, ex-US military. So he kind of had a quite a discipline about him, and really kind of taught us the discipline of if you want to be good, then we've got to be serious about what we do. And we kind of learned that from Jack. So I would say that he had a big influence. Certainly Rob Nelson. Rob kind of changed the whole outlook of the game as well. So Rob's approach to everything was a huge influence, I think, very much. But the influence, I guess, really was just the guys that we played with all the way through. People like Rob Lanario. There were three Lanario brothers: Rob, Simon, and Ian. And those three brothers who I was still playing with in the last season I played with, and playing with them in the first season I played with. So they were kind of quite an influence, just being a part of kind of playing alongside those guys. But I would say Jack Akers, Rob Nelson are probably the two big players I learned the most from. Yeah, definitely.
Really cool. You're also a GB international player. you remember much about your call up?
Yeah, 1986 was my first one. I think prior to that, the GB team had been very much a northern-based team, and we got asked to join the team. There was a few of us. Alan Bloomfield was there. I think Julian Dodwell was there, and I think there may have been a couple of others. And it was the first time really that players from the south had been a part of the GB team. And we played in a tournament in France, and it was in in Paris and around the Paris area. The thing I remember about that more than anything else is that when we got to Paris, what we found out is that the hotel accommodation had been paid for, but no meals had been paid for. And we were in Paris for, I don't know, at least a week, maybe more than a week. And nothing had been paid for as far as breakfast, lunch, and dinner was concerned. So, you know, we were just all kind of young guys anyway, didn't really have a great deal of money, didn't expect to have to pay for food as well. So I think we survived on bread and jam for about the last 3 days of that tournament. And it was weird because nobody really knew who we were. I think Ron Marshall was the manager of the team that year.
Yeah.
And we didn't know Ron, and Ron didn't know us, so he didn't really know what positions we played. He didn't know kind of how we played. So I think I played 2 games in the outfield, and I'd never played the outfield. And I don't remember whether I caught a single game or not. I may have done, I can't remember, but I played at least 2 in the outfield, which was kind of a whole new weird thing for me. But that was 86, so I remember that one very well. 89 again was in Paris.
Yeah, that was France. That's the A pool.
That was, I mean, the thing I remember, I guess, more than anything about that tournament was we played under floodlights. We played against Belgium under floodlights. We had a pitcher on our team, a guy named Steve Nero. I was catching and Steve was the pitcher. And Steve was a hard thrower, a good pitcher. But early in the game, probably about the 4th inning or so, he was batting, and he was a good hitter as well as a good pitcher. And he took a pitch from the Belgian pitcher, took a pitch right in the face, which I think shattered his cheekbone completely. And I think he ended up, an ambulance ended up taking him to hospital. And it was a horrible kind of experience. It was under floodlights, and the floodlights weren't brilliant. I remember that. And it just a pitch that was just inside. He couldn't get out of the way of it, and it completely shattered his cheekbone. So it was pretty horrendous. But I think the game was held up for maybe a half hour or so. But then when we came back, I'd been on deck when Steve got hit. And I got my only hit at the tournament, double to right field. And it was the only hit I think I got in the whole tournament. So that has always stuck in my mind, that kind of that moment of 89. Next time would have been 91, which would have been in Italy.
Yeah.
That was an interesting tournament. Mike Harold would have been the manager by that point. And we played one game in a place called Nettuno, which is not far from Rome, but it's on the coast, close to Anzio, where all the Allied landings were during World War II. So there's always that military link with me for some reason. We played in this place called Nettuno, and Oscar Marcelino was pitching. And it was a boiling hot day. I don't know how hot it was. It was a ridiculous temperature. I think by probably halfway through that game, I must have lost at least 15 pounds in weight at that point, because it was just insanely hot. But that was Oscar's weather. Oscar loved that weather. Pitch Oscar on a hot day and make him play third base on a cold day, because he was much better on the mound on a hot day. And we were playing Russia, and we were winning, but the Russians were getting the odd hit here and there, and that's the way that Oscar pitched. Oscar would keep them off balance, but they get the odd hits. And probably about the 6th inning, I think, for some reason, probably again because not knowing the players particularly well, Mike decided to replace Oscar with Brian Thurston. Now, Brian is a great pitcher, but I think Brian had pitched the day before, had started the day before, or maybe the day before that. So he wasn't in peak form, but he was a great pitcher. But the thing is, Oscar had kept the Russians off balance all the time. and could have kept doing that for the rest of the game. Brian came in. Brian wasn't, at his tip-top form because he hadn't had enough rest. And Brian was a different kind of pitcher who threw hard. And if you haven't got that velocity, the extra velocity that you need, then what happened really is just the Russians just teed off against him. And I think that kind of comes back to just, the manager needs to know the players, needs to know who they are, needs to know what they can do. You could have left Oscar out there to pitch 20 innings in that weather. He'd have loved it. He'd have been happy doing that and would have won the game for you. And we had another problem as well. I remember we had an American guy, I don't know who he was, but it was an American coach who coached the GB team in Italy, who we met about half an hour before the first game. And he coached third base, and I drew a walk early in the game. And I'm at first base, and I looked across, and I thought, I'm sure he just gave me the steal sign. I thought, no, he couldn't possibly have given me the steal sign. I don't steal, that's not part of what I do. I don't run the bases. I take it nice and slowly around the bases. That's the best I could do. Even as a younger player, I never had speed. I thought, geez, is that a steal? It can't be a steal sign. I'm not. Anyway, the pitch came down, and it was just outside, and I didn't steal. I stayed at first base. The coach, this American guy at third base, he went crazy, about me not reading the sign. And put the steal sign on for the second pitch. I thought, okay, well, he still wants to steal, but everybody else in the field knows this. So whoever the other team were, I think it might have been Russia again, actually, just threw a pitch out and threw me out by about 20 feet going down to second base. And it just came back to, if he knew who I was, he wouldn't have tried to get me to steal. It's just because we didn't spend enough time together. I think the GB team that year, I think we had a couple of training sessions together at the most. I think we went out to Holland and played a couple of games in Holland over a weekend. But for a team to play together, which is why the Spartans were so dominant during their time, is because we all played together. We all knew each other. We didn't have new guys coming in each week. We had the same players, and I knew what ground this player could cover. I knew what ground that player could cover. It's almost like you could chase after a fly ball and know that you were never going to run into anybody because everybody knew what everybody would be doing. So that was the important thing. I think that was the success of the Spartans, is not necessarily the best players, just the best team of players. And I think that's a different thing. And I think that's where the GB team failed over those earlier years. I can't speak for what happens now. I'd like to think they spend a lot more time together now, but certainly in those days, it was just a case of getting the best players in the UK together, but not giving them time to really be together. And I think that was always the hang up we had. Having said that, I enjoyed all those tournaments. It was nice to see Paris twice. It was nice to see Italy, nice to see Rome, but and the baseball was good fun, but we should have won more games than we did.
Yeah. What a shame. What do you miss the most then about playing baseball?
I think just your teammates on the field. I really think that's the biggest thing. I think just having that group of guys on the field and knowing that everybody is doing everything they possibly can to win the game. It would just again, the Spartans had an incredible team spirit. But that was on the field and off the field as well. We would every game would end, every training session would end with us meeting in the pub, and it wasn't about meeting to drink as much as we can. It was meeting to talk as much as we can. We just sit around and talk baseball for hours and hours. And those coach trips we used to do as well, when we used to head up north to play, games against the teams in the north. Those coach trips were always fun to do that, and we spent a couple of springs going over to France as well. So the coach trip over to France to play a sort of mini tournaments in France, just that being with the guys, really, I think, missing that and missing that whole feel of pulling your uniform on. And for me, then I'm putting the catcher's gear on. That meant more to me than anything, really. I would happily catch every inning and never swing a bat once. The fact that I had to bat, and that was an inconvenience in between me having the chance to catch, that was far more important to me. So just being with the guys, I think, really is what I missed from those days.
So you've transitioned into writing about baseball. Now, you're kind enough to have a copy of Baseball in Hawaii during World War II, which is your third book.
Yeah, it is. It is my third book. Yeah, three and a half because
three and a half.
Yes, I was a co-author for another book that we did. So I kind of wrote another book a few years ago called it was called When Baseball Went to War. That was the other book. And I was heavily involved in that book, but my name's not on the cover of that one. But most of the art, or half the articles inside are written by me. Yeah. But,
was it like traveling to all the bases in the army playing baseball, and like you said, when you're in Italy, there was bases around there?
Yeah.
Have you always had an interest in like the war side and married it with baseball, or how did you choose like writing about baseball and war as your sort of specialist topic?
It was a union of two subjects that I love. I guess really, I mean, it's not good to say that you love, well, not love war, but love military history. So yeah, a love of military history, which I think I've had all of my life since I was a kid. As a kid growing up, it was, the kind of war was. It was more in what we did when we were younger. We read war comics, we played war games. That doesn't happen, the way it does now, but it used to happen then. That was a big part of things. So the military, World War II was always a big thing as a kid growing up, but I never lost that interest. That was always there. And then playing baseball as well and putting the two together. And it was looking for a link between the two, really. That was where it started. I wanted to know, what happened during World War II with regards to baseball in the UK, and nobody could give me an answer. So the next step was, well, if no one can give me an answer, I need to go and find the answer and see what the answer is. And when I found out that there was lots of baseball played here during the war, that there were lots of players that came over during the war, it was like, well, how come I can't read about this anywhere? So next step was to fill that gap, I guess.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did do that. One of the things I love, I do an episode every month dedicated to British baseball history for that particular month, and I'm fascinated. I was never into history at school, but there's something about baseball history, and I find myself opening tab after tab after tab and just pulling at threads and just following. And a book like yours and what Josh Chetwynd has written about British baseball history as well, his Baseball in Europe book. And I'm loving that there's more and more books coming out now that people can read, because there's so many people doing work towards this particular topic. I think it's great that it's finally documented and it's finally there, that people can see it.
Yeah, that's really what I wanted to do. I just wanted to share, what I could find with other people. It was like, there's a big gap here. Nobody knows about this stuff. Something needs to be done about that gap needs to be filled. So it was fun, and luckily with the first book that I wrote, which was Baseball in World War II Europe, I wrote that in 1999, I think it was. So that was 3 years after I'd stopped playing that I got to that first book, and I was fortunate then because a number of people were still alive at that point who had played over here and hadn't thought about it in, 50 years. They hadn't even given it a thought at all. It slipped their mind completely. And I started contacting names that I found in newspapers, names. And a lot of the Stars and Stripes, which was the US military newspaper during the war, would often have a name and it would have a hometown. And the good thing about Americans is they don't travel much. They tend to stay where they were born. A lot of them seem, and what I could do is I could contact the town and say, does this person still live here? And I'd contact the local library or something. I'd say, yeah, he does still live here. Here's his address. And I'd write to that person and start, build up this connection about wartime baseball. And it'd be the first time they'd ever even given it a thought in 50 or more years. And they would send me some of these stories and pictures, photographs, newspaper clippings that they kept and just didn't know what to do. Luckily they hadn't thrown a lot of this stuff out. And it was just so much stuff. I thought, right, well, this now needs to be gathered and put into a book somehow. Yeah. So that was my first attempt.
What's the most interesting thing that you found out when doing your research?
About baseball in the UK during the war. I think the probably the most interesting thing was about a guy named Lefty Brewer who pitched. Well, he never quite made it to the Washington Senators. He was with the Washington Senators for spring training for a couple of seasons, but pitched all through the minor leagues, won 23 games his rookie year in the minors. So here's a guy who could throw a no-hitter his rookie year as well. Great pitcher, real tough guy as well. When World War II came along, he joined the paratroopers. And he trained in the US and then came over to here. So he came over to, landed at a place called Gourock, which is here in Scotland, which is minutes away from where I live right now. And then by train was transported down to Nottingham. Now, this was prior to D-Day. So D-Day is happening on June the 6th. On May the 28th or May the 29th, I can't remember offhand right now. One of those days, which is 7 days before the D-Day landings, a baseball game was held in Nottingham between two teams of paratroopers, including this guy, Lefty Brewer. It's a strange thing. Why were they playing baseball 7 days before the D-Day landings? And there's no real logical reason for them to be playing. They should have been in training, ready for the landings. The one thought is that maybe it was arranged to fool the Germans with regards to, well, if they're playing baseball, there's no way any landings are going to happen soon. So it's possible, because it was a public game. It was in one of the stadiums in Nottingham. It was open to a big crowd of, I think, about 20,000 of local people were there. So it may have been done as a kind of just to fool the Germans into thinking the landing is not happening anytime soon. So Lefty played in that game, and then 6-7 days later he was floating through the air, coming down in as a paratrooper coming down into Normandy, and he survived half of the first day and was killed in action sometime after lunchtime on June the 6th. So that was all that preparation that he'd done, all that training he'd done for all those years, and his combat time was half a day. But played in what I think is quite an important game, which was maybe there as a way of fooling the Germans into thinking it wasn't, the whole D-Day thing wasn't going to happen because Germans had no idea when it was going to happen, but trying to make them think it was no way it was going to happen in the next few days. So I found that quite an intriguing little story, really.
Yeah, that got to me a bit. That's
he was one of many that died, and that's Major League Baseball has never done anything about remembering the professional players that died. When I started doing the research on players that were killed in action, the list stood at around about 25. I now have the list at around about 160. So there's about 160 players who played professional baseball and died while serving in the military. That's a lot of people. I'd like MLB to do something about that. Just remember them somewhere, a plaque, whatever it might be.
Is that something that's in the pipeline that you could be working on potentially? Because I know you've done stuff was it the minor leagues?
Yeah.
Where you did the announcements? Yeah,
we did the announcements it was a few years ago. Yeah. I don't know. I'd like to. I'll keep trying. I keep plugging away. We keep trying different things. We keep trying different ways of making them aware of this. I'm pretty sure they're aware of these names. It's just maybe they don't know how to honor these people. It'd be nice if there was just somewhere where you could go and you could just see that list. The trouble with the list, of course, is it keeps growing. It's not. Nobody has the actual figure. I've added one, and in fact, I've added two in the last few weeks. Two guys we never knew anything about, who played minor league baseball. One only played for one season. Then he got drafted into the military, came over to Europe to fight, and he died 3 days after he arrived in France. They're all tragic stories, and it'd be just nice for those to be remembered somewhere. I think the Hall of Fame should really have a little section dedicated to them. Maybe that would be the ideal thing. Yeah.
Yeah. For those that don't like, I very vaguely touched on the stuff with the minor leagues. Do you want to tell people that may not know what I might be waffling on about there?
In what way? About the?
I said before, like you did something with the minor leagues, but I
Oh,
just
yeah.
sort of forgot then that I was doing a podcast for people
Yeah.
need more elaborate questions. Then
It
did
was
you
just
do something?
yeah, we did a few years. I forget when it was now. It was a few years ago. But I worked with a minor league to say, look, you need to remember, all the players that were killed in action in any war, really. First World War, Second World War, Korean War, Vietnam, and what they did. I think they did a kind of a. I think they did a minute's silence. I think in every minor league park on the same day. So I think it was a Sunday. And they held a kind of a minute silence in every single minor league park that day to remember all these players. It's only ever happened once, and it was great that it happened. But it would be kind of nice if we could make that happen every year, and maybe extend it to the major league parks as well. I think some of the teams do their own little things, but I just think it needs to be a bit more widespread. I think really.
Yeah, I'm interested to know what the listeners think about that as well. Let us know. You can contact Gary as well. He's on social media. Drop him any ideas and suggestions.
Definitely,
this is fascinating. Really, really is. So let's touch then on your wonderful book, Baseball in Hawaii during World War II. Can you describe this book to us and how it came to be?
Yeah, it's a pandemic project. I think that's the best way to describe it. I think it was. As I said earlier, my career is working with members of staff. So what I do is I kind of coach and train people with kind of soft skills in the workplace. When the pandemic hit, that stops. There was hardly anybody in the workplace anyway, and certainly training wasn't one of the things that anybody wanted. So I had some time on my hands. I thought, what do I do with this time? And I kind of looked at what projects have I had in the background and never really got off the ground. And this one just kept kind of coming back to me all the time, that this baseball in Hawaii. Hawaii was a hub of baseball. It was a military hub, but it was also, therefore it attracted a lot of baseball players as well. So the idea was, let's find out what happened and let's put all the pieces together. Again, there's never been a book that's told the whole story. There have been articles over time that have focused on events, because there was a very famous 1944 Army-Navy series game that took place with all the big stars. In fact, the cover of the book is the scoreboard of that game. And if you look on there, you'll see names like DiMaggio and Pee Wee Reese, and I'm just trying to see who else is on, Barney McCoskey, Phil Rizzuto, all these big names, these hugely famous major league players. There were 13 Hall of Famers in Hawaii during the war playing baseball. It was this hive of outstanding players, and I just felt that what we needed was the complete story from the beginning of the war to the end of the war, rather than just these little pieces that highlighted on this World Series game that had happened. So that was it, really. I just thought, let's put the pieces together. And thanks to a lengthy pandemic, I had the time to put it together. So something good has to come out of COVID, I guess. And that was, for me, I guess that was the good thing, was to be able to put that together. I have the time to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, like you say, what a great way to spend a pandemic. Beats curling up in a ball and crying like I did for a lot of it. Oh, I'm glad I can laugh at that. So how do you start such a project? Can you talk us through the process there? Like, do you find one article and then do research on that and let it grow, or do you spend a lot of time researching before you kick off the project?
The first thing that I did really was, let's try and find everything that's been written so far. I think that's kind of step one. Find out what's been written so far and verify what's been written as well. Because you can pick up a book, a magazine, an article somewhere and read it and take that as gospel, but I think you have to be careful with that. So kind of verifying all the things that I could find that existed, put all of that sort of stuff together, and that gives me a starting point at least. But then really, because I had the time to do it, to be honest, what I did with this is I read every single Hawaiian newspaper from the beginning of 1941 to the middle of 1946. Every newspaper, every day.
That's amazing.
There's two newspapers. There were two main newspapers in Hawaii, and then there was one over on another island, a newspaper in Hilo that was there as well. So I guess three newspapers really, and just read every single day and just gathered all the information from there, and then kind of cross-checking all of that information, getting in touch with people that I know that may have some information, gathering all the photographs that I could from people that I know, and getting them to share the stuff they had. So it's a lengthy project. If anybody wants to try it, it's a wonderful project, but you kind of get lost in it. Must admit.
Yeah. I can, well, not to that sort of degree, but I know what you mean. Like researching for the history segments, like I look at a couple of different websites, and for example, Project Cobb that I use.
Yeah.
And I'm literally I'll put in like a site search, and I'll look for like August to pull through any entries where August is mentioned, or May. May was fun because they had words like, and then he may do this, and all those results will pull through. It's like 15 results on one page, and you get to like 18 pages, and it's like literally reading through fanzines and articles and magazines and handwritten notes. And I literally sit there on like a day after I'll have, when I should be doing something else, and I'll spend like 3 or 4 hours, and I won't have written anything down, but I'll just get lost in just scrolling through all this amazing text from an era that most people probably don't even know about. And like, how can I include this into the episode to make it interesting, but making it relevant to history as well? And then what I decided to do is any sort of articles and stuff that I found quite interesting, I would just copy the links to it and then send it out in a tweet. So like, this happened on this day in 1936, and you can read more about it here, to try and give people more exposure to it. Because for me, I've only just really found the game of late as a player, and really got involved in it. But the more that I'm uncovering, the more I'm kicking myself because I missed out on so much.
Yeah, I know.
And I just want other people to, even if like a few people's looking and go, oh wow, that was really cool, then I've kind of feel like I've done a bit of a job there.
Definitely, yeah. I think that's what I'm trying to do there, is I'm trying to kind of fill those gaps for people that would have that interest. It's a small market, and British baseball is a small market, but there's still people there that want this stuff. And I think if that's what you're doing, then you're serving that market. And I think that's a great thing to be doing. And and I'm trying to serve that that small military World War II kind of baseball market, and give them what I think they need. Yeah. That's
amazing. I love it. I literally could go on for another couple of hours doing this, because it's so good. We're gonna have to do another show another time and just uncover some more things, because we are sort of coming towards the close of the show, which is gutting. How then do you balance your writing with everyday life? How much time do you dedicate to the writing compared to the bits and pieces?
The writing has to fit where it can. I don't know if I put time aside for it. I suppose it just depends on what's happening, outside of work and personal life, really. And so the pandemic just gave me that great opportunity. There's another project at the moment that we're looking at now, which I'm going to do in conjunction with a friend of mine, Sean Hennessy, in the US, and we're looking at doing baseball in Europe during World War II. So that's going to include pretty much what I did in my first book, but that will be massively expanded because there's so much more to add to that.
Yeah.
But then also everything that happened in Europe. So all the games that were played during the war in France, Germany, Holland, Italy, even down as far as North Africa, because really that all kind of comes under the same military Mediterranean zone. So that's going to be our next project, but it's just kind of figuring out when can we get that started, and it's just time will come up. There'll be that week where you think, well, this is a slow week, so right, let's just get stuck into that. But you've got to find that balance, otherwise you upset too many other people. That's always the problem.
Yeah. Do you find it hard to stay motivated and driven when these projects can become so big, or do you just have that natural drive to have it anyway?
I think there is a natural drive there. I think the bigger the project gets, the more I get into it. I think really, it's I loved kind of reading those newspapers, and that would open up another avenue that I never even considered. So then you explore that avenue, and that opens up another avenue you never even looked at. So I had no idea that Hawaiian players played in the Japanese pro leagues before the war. That was something that never even crossed my mind. I just hadn't given it an ounce of thought. And it turned out that like about 20 Hawaiian players went and played in Japan during the war. All of them with Japanese ancestry, but went to play in Japan, and some of them actually stayed in Japan during the war and actually remained in Japan playing baseball through the war. Some of them even ended up in the Japanese military, not through choice. They ended up getting kind of drafted into the Japanese military, but they were Hawaiians. They were technically Americans. So I never knew anything about that. That was a whole new angle for me. So that opened up a whole new section in the book that I hadn't planned on putting in there. Really, it was just discovering all these new avenues, and I thought, well, there's a story that needs to be told.
Yeah, it is brilliant. Gary, where can we find your work if we're going to look for the books, or your website as well?
Amazon. The book is on pretty much every Amazon throughout the world. So whatever your local, whether it be .co.uk or whether it be in any European countries or wherever, you will find that book on there. Just look up baseball in Hawaii during World War II. As far as the websites are concerned, baseballinwartime.com is my military baseball wartime website, but I also have another one called baseballsgreatestsacrifice.com. That is all about players who lost their lives during World War II. So that's dedicated to that 160 players that I mentioned from World War II. There's about 25 from World War I. There's loads more we haven't found in that. There's also players from Korea, Vietnam, and more recent wars, as well. So anybody who played baseball, not just at pro level, but also college players or even kind of well-known amateur players, they're all on there somewhere. They've got their own biography, and if they haven't, let me know, because I need to put them on there. That should be on there as well. So
I'll make sure that I put all the links to all your material within the show notes too, so nobody will miss anything from there. This has been honestly superb and fascinating. Just leads me now to the bottom of the seventh. Last three questions, and your answers are going to be strikes or you're going to get on base. Hopefully by the end of it, you'll have bases loaded and then you can walk them off. So Gary Bedingfield, do you have any hidden talents?
Hidden talents? Yes, I play the drums.
Oh, do you? Is that what's behind you?
That is, there you go. Right there, yeah.
Got a nice setup.
So that's my hidden talent. Well, I don't know about talent, but yes, it's my hidden pastime. How about that?
Yeah. What are you most afraid of?
I'm not a fan of water. I must admit, I don't know if I'm afraid of water, but I don't like deep water. I don't like being in water where I can't touch the bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, Jaws did that for me. I've never got over it. It's one of the best films I've ever seen. But when I go surfing in Cornwall, I'm in it for about 5 minutes, and then I remember where I am, what I'm doing, and I freak out. And
that's enough.
Oh, what a ridiculous imagination. Do you have any guilty pleasures?
Guilty pleasures. I do like a good wine, I must admit. So maybe that's my guilty pleasure. I like a good bottle of wine. I don't mean wine as in moaning, and but I like not a good, that type of wine. I like a good glass of wine. I must admit.
Can you recommend any?
I'm kind of into New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc at the moment. So a white wine that I particularly like. I think it's a good summer wine. So if you're into Sauvignon, look out for a good New Zealand one from the Marlborough region, and you'll be onto a good wine.
Yeah, that's lovely. I'm satisfied. And they're all loaded. So Gary, the last word goes to the guests. So up to you, my friend. You can walk them off. Any shout outs, any parting words you want to give?
I'd just like to say really, hi to all the former baseball players that I used to play against or play with over the years. They're all the guys that are really, made baseball survive as long as it has. We played our part, I guess, 70s, 80s, 90s. I'm glad the game is still going. To me, there isn't another sport. I don't follow any other sport. I never have. I played cricket before I started playing baseball, and then I dropped cricket. And so for me, baseball is the only game that has ever been around. So all the guys that I've known over all those years, they're all heroes to me in their own special way.
Lovely. Gary, what a great way to end the show. Thank you very much for being my guest, and I'll see you on the other side.
Thanks, Matt. Good to see you.
Take care. Ta-ra.
Thanks a lot. Bye now.